Hello and welcome to Tech Deals. Which Intel CPU should you buy? Today we are having a detailed look at the i5, i7, and i9 Coffee Lake Refresh 9th generation of core processors from Intel, with the bonus of some AMD stuff thrown in as well. We've got benchmarks, gaming and non-gaming, cooler analysis, which cooler should you buy because these don't come with coolers, and a whole bunch more information. Coming soon will be a similar video with the Ryzen 5, 7, and Ryzen 9 CPUs, a full look at Zen 2, comparing them to Intel here, but that's for the next video. You will also find linked in the video description below links to everything here, Intel and AMD, to both Amazon and Newegg. Those are affiliate links. They do support the channel. I bought every single CPU that you see up here. None of these were product samples. It is worth noting that almost everything else over here I also bought as well. There are only 3 things in this entire test that were provided to me by the manufacturers. That Noctua NH-D15 cooler, the ASRock Z390 Taichi motherboard, and the Seasonic Prime power supply that's inside the test bench. The RAM, the CPU, and even that very nice graphics card. So support the channel, use those links. It's greatly appreciated. In the fall of 2018, Intel launched their 9th generation of CPUs. I've already done extensive tests, videos, and benchmarks on the i9-9900K. This is the first time I've taken a detailed look at the 2 lower-end CPUs, and of course now we have a chance to compare them to Zen 2 in the form of the 3600X here. These are interesting, and we're going to talk in great deal about the relative value of these CPUs throughout this video. However, if you look at the length of this video and go, I don't have time for that, just give me the short and sweet version. Not to worry, go to this part of the video, and that'll be my conclusions and the short version. However, there's a lot of other information here besides just which one should you buy and which is best, because often the answer is, it depends. So we'll talk about that throughout this video. Our testing configuration today is the ASRock Z390 Taichi motherboard. It is an excellent $200 motherboard appropriate for any of these CPUs. We have the Noctua NH-D15 $90 tower cooler providing cooling for all 3 of our Intel CPUs, and all 3 were overclocked to a fixed 5 GHz clock speed with no AVX offset. These run cool and quiet at 5 GHz with an appropriate cooler like that, as you'll see when I show you the video from the benchmarks themselves. We have 32 gigabytes of DDR4 3200 MHz CL16 memory. No, you don't really need 32 gigs of RAM these days. 16 is enough, but if you want to future-proof yourself, it is nice. And if you want to do content creation as well. And then finally, we have the Asus ROG Strix RTX 2080 Ti factory overclocked graphics card. It's a beast. On the AMD side, we tested on the Asus ROG Strix X470-F motherboard. That is also a premium $200 motherboard. It's not a 500 series, but there's no performance difference between 400 and 500 series, so it wouldn't make any difference for the purpose of these tests. The Ryzen 5 was run at stock speeds, no performance boost overdrive, no overclocking, and the stock Wraithspire cooler that comes with it was used. When you take a look at these benchmark results, you might find that detail interesting. All of the games you're about to see today were tested at 1080p high detail. I am aware of the fact that very few people buying a $1,200 RTX 2080 Ti are playing their games at 1080p high detail. I get it. You're probably playing at 1440p at very high or maybe even 4K. However, the purpose of the test today is to determine the CPU performance and how much additional reserve performance they have beyond what's required to just play the game. So we're trying to remove graphics from the equation. These are perfect condition test benches. No programs are running in the background. These are all fresh installs of the spring 1903 release. These weren't upgraded. These aren't updates. There's only been one version, the latest version of the NVIDIA drivers installed. Nothing's running in the background. It's as perfect gets. Most likely, your machine has a bunch of programs installed, you've got a bunch of things running in the test tray, you've gone through several Windows upgrades, multiple drivers upgrades, maybe you're multitasking, running things in the background, listening to music, watching videos. And so what this is designed to do is to show you how much raw performance do these have and how much reserve performance beyond just what's really needed to play a game do they have. It is also worth noting that today's top-of-the-line $1,200 graphics card becomes 2 generations down the road RTX 4060 for $400 that probably beats this. It's expensive to be top of the line. If you go 2 generations back, that would have been the GTX 980 Ti, which was a great card in its day, but a modern RTX 2060 beats it in all respects, and that's a $350 card. So if you're buying a CPU that you want 5 years of use out of and you plan a midlife graphics card upgrade, even if you have a RTX 2060 or maybe the new RX 5700 today, which won't have as much of a difference in games today as this does, when you do the midlife upgrade 3 years from now and buy whatever the $300 or $400 card is then, that card will probably be equal to this in performance. So what you're seeing today is how much future-proofing your CPU might have in front of it, as opposed to just what it plays in today's games. As a quick refresher on these CPUs, which I have covered in the past, however, none of the Intel chips come with a cooler. You'll have to add one. The i5 9600K is a 6-core, 6-thread processor, no hyperthreading. The i7 9700K is an 8-core, 8-thread, no hyperthreading processor, and the i9 9900K is an 8-core, 16-thread processor. It's the only one of the lineup, at least of these, that has hyperthreading included. It's worth noting on the i7, it's kind of an upgrade and kind of not. Last year's CPU was the i7 8700K. I say last year's, this was 2017. This is 6 cores, 12 threads, ironically equal to the Ryzen 5 in terms of core and thread count. So it has fewer cores, but more threads than the latest i7, which is an interesting choice from Intel. I hope when the 10th generation of these chips come around, they just put hyperthreading on everything. That would be pretty nice. But as far as these CPUs go, 250, 350, 480 is the current going price of these on Amazon and Newegg when this video was filmed in the summer of 2019. Prices change all the time, but that's what they're going for at the moment. I will talk about coolers and cooler suggestions at the end of the video after the benchmarks. First up, we have Assassin's Creed Odyssey. This is an intensive game that uses a lot of resources, and it shows the difference in CPU usage very well, even here in the built-in benchmark. In just a second, I'm going to slow it down to 10% speed so you can take a closer look at the changing usage of each of the CPUs. And that's 10% speed. Notice on the upper left-hand corner, our Ryzen 5 3600X is at 78% usage. That is way beyond all 6 cores and is deep into the hyperthreading. Notice the i5 9600K is not at 100% usage, but it just can't quite keep up. It's simply out of cores and threads, and thus the lower graphics card utilization. Back to normal speed here. Take a look at the i7 9700K. It is not quite at 100% usage all the time, but it's pretty close. It actually pinged 100% a couple times. Here it's at 93%. Notice the i9 9900K is running around 50%. So this game does use 8 cores, or rather 8 threads when it's available. And while it is completely playable on an i7 9700K, keep in mind that you have no reserve for the future. If any future games get any more demanding than this, you don't have anything left sort of in the reservoir in order to play them. You'll be due for a CPU upgrade. And frankly, for a CPU that costs as much as that, yeah, I'm not entirely sure that's the brightest idea possible. Interestingly enough, none of these CPUs can actually fully feed our RTX 2080 Ti at 1080p high detail here. Notice even the i7 and i9 CPUs are only running about 87% graphics card usage. So even though we're not using every core and every thread possible, we are actually still being held back by our CPU. How does overall performance look? Here we go. The Ryzen 5 3600X averaged 110 frames per second, 103 on the i5 9600K, and I'll note that that's at 5 GHz clock speed. That is a huge disparity in clock speed, which really shows how good that Ryzen 5 3600X really is. Stepping up to the i7 9700K, we're at 120 frames per second. Now we're at a 33 minimum on that, but don't pay too much attention to the minimums here. I am going to start going forward doing 1% lows even in built-in benchmarks because they can be so variable on the minimum, but unfortunately I don't have those for you today. In terms of the i9 9900K, it's the same as the i7. 121, 120, those are rounding errors. Basically, the i7 9700K plays everything today just fine. 8 cores and 8 threads is enough, but as I showed you, it just has no headroom for the future. Next up, we have Far Cry New Dawn, the semi-sequel to Far Cry 5. And again, just like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I'm going to take 2 sections in here and slow them down to 10% speed so you can more closely study the numbers, which I've done right here. Now, this particular game, for whatever reason, just likes Intel processors, or perhaps it likes single-core speed. Notice that the usage of each of our CPUs is way lower than on Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Now, again, these are built-in benchmarks, and I may very well follow this up with some live gameplay, because if you're really testing CPUs, there is often a difference between CPU usage in benchmarks versus live gameplay, but, well, you work with what you've got, and I'm, after all, trying to show the comparison here to the Ryzen 5 3600X, which I've already done. Notice that the usage on that 3600X is only about 30 to 33% here. That's not huge. The i7 9700K is at 50%, so it's only using 4 of the cores, which translates to the i9 at 25% because it's hyper-threaded, and so 25% would be 4-core usage. So in this benchmark, it does not care about any of the cores and threads, and thus the i5 9600K frankly looks just about as good as all the other CPUs because it's a 6-core, 6-thread chip, and thus it's not held back by the lack of its cores and threads, perhaps as much as it was in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Let's slow this down here when the helicopter's on screen. In fact, you can kind of see the windmill effect of the helicopter blades, totally unattended, but I just noticed it. And you'll notice that the game speed is very, very similar between the 3 Intel chips. It is faster on the i9, and I will remind you, all the Intel CPUs here were overclocked to 5 gigahertz fixed speed. They were all run on the same motherboard, with the same cooler, with the same BIOS settings, with the same RAM. The only difference is I swapped CPUs, but the overall settings were exactly the same. Now, there's cache difference on the chips. There's more cache on the i9 than the i5, for example. But that's not necessarily everything, but that might be part of it. You can certainly see the usage difference. 71% usage on the i5 versus 30% usage on the i9. The question comes down to, do you want to buy a CPU that only plays today's games? Or do you want to buy a CPU that plays today's games and tomorrow's games? Do you want to buy a CPU that has room for live streaming, multitasking, watching videos in one monitor while playing a game in another, listening to music, doing other things besides only playing a game? Because while the i5 actually plays most games just fine, it doesn't have that reserve performance to do anything else. And of course, these are completely clean test benches. These are clean installs of Windows with clean installs of drivers, with nothing running in the background, in a perfect environment. They're not used, they're not 27 Windows updates into their Windows installs, something to keep in mind. Here you can see 112 frames per second average on the Ryzen 5 versus 134, 137, and 143 on the i9. The higher end CPUs are not necessarily about frame rate, and they're not even about minimum frame rates. 105 to 108 to 113 are trivial differences in minimum frame rates. The Far Cry built-in benchmark is very consistent, and these minimum frame rates, much more than Assassin's Creed Odyssey, are dependable. And of course, the maximums are just absolutely crazy. You don't buy the i9 over the i7 or i5 because you want more frame rate. You buy them because you want smoother frame rates, the ability to multitask, and you want longevity in your processor. And of course, if you're on a budget, allow me to point you to the left side of the screen. The Ryzen 5 3600, or honestly the 3700X, which I will test in an upcoming video, is also an excellent choice. Now, the last benchmark I'm going to show you the footage of, because I'm trying to keep this video's runtime down, I'm not trying to stretch out runtimes here, is Shadow of the Tomb Raider. This game is actually pretty well optimized and runs great on both AMD and Intel systems. Here we're slowing down to 10% speed because the part I want you to look at is the CPU utilization. On the Ryzen 5 3600X, we're running at 68% usage. Come down to the bottom right-hand corner of the screen and you'll notice that the i9 9900K is also about the same usage. It's 66% usage. Now hold on, you say. It's got 8 cores, 16 threads. Why is the usage so similar? Well, okay, the Ryzen just jumped slightly. Part of it is because it has so much more performance per core and thread, it can keep the game fed. Look at the difference in graphics card utilization, 73% versus 94% between the Ryzen 5 and the i9. That right there should tell you something. The extra performance of the i9 at 5 GHz has future performance as you upgrade graphics cards, whereas the Ryzen 5 is basically giving you everything you've got. Now, if you have a mid-range card, this doesn't matter so much right now. Now look at the i5 9600K and the i7 9700K, upper right and bottom left. Notice they're nearly maxed out. The i5 is maxed out. These have zero reserve performance, and in fact, that i5 is holding it back a little bit. Not terribly so, but the minute you get into a busier environment than shown right here, you're going to start to get stutter. The frame rate will be fine. It will not be smooth, however. It will start getting stuttery and jumpy. I know I've said it before. I'm going to keep saying it. Cores and threads do matter. We have entered the world where these things do make a difference. Back in the days of Sandy Bridge and Ivy Bridge, they didn't. In fact, hyper-threading back in those days often held back games. It is true that in the second, third, and sometimes even fourth generation of chips, the non-hyper-threaded chips would be a little bit faster. And there are still a few occasions where that is true. But in 2019, by far, the addition of the extra threads from hyper-threading, or SMT in the case of AMD, and simply having more cores does make a difference. If you're never going to play a new game again, if you play 2 to 3 to 4-year-old games, if you play casual games, none of this matters. I'm not going to slow this down here till we get to the very end because I'm getting kind of wordy here and it's running a bit long. But if you're not playing new games, then everything I've just said does not matter. If you're playing, games that just don't use more than 2 to 4 cores, if you're playing World of Warships, World of Tanks, League of Legends, Dota 2, even to some extent Rainbow Six Siege, although if you're a competitive player, you want a premium machine, if you can afford it. If you're playing Overwatch, yes, Overwatch will use cores and threads, but we're talking 250 to 300 frames per second. Again, unless you're a hyper-competitive player, you don't need all of this to play those sorts of games. But if you want to play new games, and if you're building a new machine today, and you want that machine to last 3 to 5 years and be able to play any new game that comes out, then cores and threads is where it is at. Let me remind you, the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Scarlet, whatever they end up calling it, are coming out in 18 months at the end of 2020. They will have 8 cores and 16 threads of Zen 2. They will be substantially faster than the existing machines. And within 18 months of those coming out, basically all the new release games are going to be developed within that envelope. Starting right now, game developers are already aiming for that because they all want to have launch titles and games that come out when the new consoles come out. And frankly, there's so many console ports these days, and game developers are trying to spread their budgets and development dollars around, that these new consoles and these new inexpensive Ryzen processors have really pushed forward the world. The days of 4 cores being enough are over. The days of 6 cores, in my opinion, are just a speed bump on the way to 8. If you're a serious user, and I will talk about this in the upcoming video where I look at the 3 different levels of Ryzen chips, if you're serious about playing everything and you want 5+ years of longevity, the Ryzen 9 3900X is not crazy, but we'll talk about that in another video. 134 for the Ryzen 5 3600X. That's spectacular and amazing. And as great as the i9 is, allow me to point out that if you're on a tight budget, 134 frames per second is spectacular. Partly that's aided due to our graphics card, but the performance wouldn't be much different with an RTX 2070 either, because we were so CPU limited there. It wouldn't be much slower with a maybe $500 graphics card instead of this monstrous behemoth. 145, 160, and 165 on the 3 levels of the Intel chips. And the minimums are very good as well. The minimums do pretty good here in Shadow of the Tomb Raider of reflecting performance. I do want to draw your attention to the max frame rate here. 176 on Ryzen versus mid-200s, 235, 255 on the i9. That's the reserve future performance. Now, I understand if you don't have a 240 hertz monitor, you're going to say, well, what do I care? Because future games won't run as fast, but they'll all drag down equally. Games that come out 3 years from now will drag all of these numbers down in a tiered ladder like this. I love Zen 2. Ryzen is amazing. AMD deserves 150% credit for the amazing features of Zen 2. It's amazing, but it's not as fast as Intel. What this is demonstrating is that if you plan to keep a CPU for a long period of time and you want future reserve performance for your next graphics card, Intel's got it and Zen 2 doesn't, to a point, depending upon what you care about. On the flip side, that Ryzen 5 3600X will probably play games at 60 to 100 frames per second for the next 3 to 5 years, 99% of the time. We are now going to go through the rest of the games that I tested much, much quicker. You can certainly pause the video and look at any of these slides if you're interested. Again, I am not trying to pad the runtime. Sometimes people look at the length of my videos and say, man, why do you make these 20, 30, 40-minute videos? I don't have time to watch that. Just give me the short version. Okay, this video is not going to be short. What I did is I took time to slow down the 3 video benchmarks that I did show you and talk about them in detail, and then just show you these performance slides so you can kind of get an idea of what to expect. Something I'm not showing you here are multiplayer online games that really do need the cores and threads to a greater extent than these particular benchmarks. Those take a lot longer to properly benchmark. In fact, I could probably only get 3 or 4 total games tested in the amount of time that I did all of the benchmarks that you see here. The 2 top games that come to mind are Battlefield 5 64-player online multiplayer conquest, which I absolutely know from personal experience and from a fact would be a stuttering mess on that i5 9600K. It'll run, but it will not run smoothly in terms of frame pace delivering. Ironically, I have gotten a lot of comments from people, a lot of posts, both before and after the upgrade. I've had people who played on even 4-core i5s who say, what are you talking about, man? I play Battlefield 5 online multiplayer. It's fine. What's the big deal? And then I get follow-up posts from people who go, holy, what the mother of Mary, Jesus, Lord Almighty happened there? I didn't know what I was missing because they upgraded their CPU, not even necessarily to a faster chip. I remember a message from somebody who was running on an i5 6600K, overclocked, I don't know, 4.5, 4.7 gigahertz, 4 cores, 4 threads, and they were playing it and they go, my frame rate's fine, I've tested it, my machine is fine. And then they upgraded to like a Ryzen 5 2600 non-X chip, which is not faster on a per core per thread basis. And they're like, I didn't have any idea what I was missing. And I said, it's not faster, is it? And they're like, no, but it is so much smoother. Everything is fluid. The control, the input, my accuracy, the game is like a whole new game. Yes, it is. And that's something that does not show up in benchmark charts. So even if I benchmark it, the challenge is the numbers on the screen don't look nearly as impressive as the real world result, which is part of the reason I haven't done it yet. But I may do it just because, I don't know, people want to see it and people want to hear it talked about, or they should anyway. The other big game worth talking about is Call of Duty Black Ops 4. That game will take that Ryzen 5 3600X chip and use all 12 threads right now in 2019. This is not some future 3-year thing. And this is one of the single biggest reasons why I think the Ryzen 7 3700X is a much better buy. The 3600X is $250. If you're on a budget, buy the 3600 non-X for $200. But if you've got a little bit more money, get the 3700X. Yes, it's $100-something more, but it's 8 cores, 16 threads, and it's much more future-proofed than 6-core 12-thread chips. I really do believe the future is 8-core 16-thread chips. And in fact, that's why I said earlier that if you want some future-proofing and you want to live stream, multitask, if you want a chip that's 5+ years, that 12-core 24-thread Ryzen 9 3900X is not a waste of money if you have the $500. Now that's enough of the gaming benchmarks. Let's take a look at non-gaming benchmarks. Now some of these will surprise you and some of them won't. Here we're going to take a look at GPU-Z's built-in benchmark first. On the single core side of things, the Ryzen 5 3600X is about 10% slower than the Intel chips. However, considering that the Intel chips are overclocked to 5 gigahertz, core for core, clock for clock, There isn't actually that much raw compute integer difference, which is really what this is testing, between the various CPUs, and yet you saw multiple game benchmarks where the Ryzen was slower. Welcome to the world of Intel optimizations. If AMD keeps smashing it like they have over the past 2-3 years now, then you may very well see that gap close. On the multi-core side, 4214 on the multi-core score for the Ryzen 5 3600X versus 3392 on the i5 9600K. Now, the i5 is 20% slower than the Ryzen 5, but of course it doesn't have hyperthreading enabled, which is part of it, even with its great clock speed. Notice the 5 GHz i7 is almost equal. It's a little bit faster, but it's very, very close in speed. 8 cores, 8 threads versus 6 cores, 12 threads on the Ryzen 5. And of course, the i9 wins this one, which should surprise exactly 0 of you. Cinebench R20. Now, AMD loves to use Cinebench because, frankly, Cinebench shows off their CPUs very well. And you can see here the single-core scores are closer than they were on the CPU Z bench. It depends upon which benchmark you look at to see how close or how far apart the chips are. Notice in multi-threaded again, the i7 9700K, which I'll remind you is more than $100 more expensive than the Ryzen 5 3600X and doesn't include a cooler, is only marginally faster than the Ryzen 5 3600X. The i5 loses this, and the i9 naturally wins it. Let's move to a real-world benchmark. The 7-zip compression-decompression utility has a built-in benchmark, and the Ryzen 5 3600 of course beats the i5, but it also beats the i7 here in every respect. Part of that is the 12 threads it has to work with, that they do help, especially in a heavily multi-threaded test like 7-zip. However, the huge level 3 cache and the better overall caching algorithm of the Ryzen 5 chip also help here because compression and decompression are heavily dependent upon memory transfer and cache latencies and the internal design of the chip. And AMD does really well with these sorts of tests, better than the older, quote, Lake architecture that we're still dealing with Intel. Now, the i9 wins these here, and it wins them pretty handedly, but of course it has 8 cores and 16 threads, and at 5 GHz, it's going to pull away. The fact that the Ryzen 5 is even this close to a $490 CPU, no cooler included at that price, is downright remarkable. Wait till you see the upcoming video with the 2 Ryzen 7 and Ryzen 9 CPUs in this. Last but not least, let's take a look at Blender's built-in benchmark. 27 minutes for the i5. Nobody who's serious about doing 3D rendering like Blender should even consider anything with a 5 in its name. As great as the Ryzen 5 3600X is, and it does almost match the i7 in performance, let's be honest here. You should have a Ryzen 7 or Ryzen 9 or an i9 or maybe even a high-end desktop if you're serious about this. On the other hand, because Blender is free, and because of the fact that you can play with it on a casual basis, if you aren't making money with your computer, that Ryzen 5 is an incredible value, all things considered. But if you're at all serious about making money, yeah, you should have more than that. Thank you to all of you who took the time to watch all of that. It certainly took a lot of time to make it. I did not reuse old benchmarks on any of these Intel chips. They were freshly tested with all the latest BIOS patches, BIOS updates, security updates, and everything else applied. So these are not a reuse of the launch benchmarks. Let me know what you think of the change in format. That's what the comment section is down there for, below the video description. Do you like the fact that I took a closer look at 3 of the benchmarks, talked about them in more detail, slowed them down, and then just showed you the rest of the charts much more quickly? It didn't really shorten the video as much as I thought it might because I talked a bit more than I expected to when I slowed them down. But instead of giving you 30 seconds per game and just kind of breezing through each one, I took a closer look at those 3. Let me know what you think. Also, let me know how important is it to you that I cover actual multiplayer combat in, say, Battlefield 5 or Call of Duty Black Ops 4. From experience, and I have played and tested these games, the cores and threads really make a bigger difference, but it doesn't necessarily show up in the frame rate as much as you'd think. The 1% lows to some extent, which I would certainly use as opposed to minimums when testing those. The challenge is its frame pacing, much more so than it is frame rate, and it's the performance and playability, as I talked about. Hopefully you were watching during those benchmarks and didn't skip ahead. It's the smoothness and control. It's one of those things that you experience and feel, and it really is a wow moment. Going from a 4 or 6 thread i5 to, say, a Ryzen 5 3600 is a huge improvement when you're playing those kinds of games. So let me know what you think down below. The short version of all of this testing, and if you have skipped ahead from the beginning of the video, well, fair enough, I understand. There are 4 CPUs that I would currently buy on the market today. 3 of them aren't in this video. The Ryzen 5 3600, not the X, the 3600, it is $200. It comes with a Race Stealth cooler, 6 cores, 12 threads. Put it on a $100 B450 board, you've got yourself amazing value for the money. Use the included cooler and enjoy a great machine. That's the first choice. The second choice would be, if you want more performance, step up to the Ryzen 7 3700X, which is what's below it right there. That'll be coming up in the next video. The results aren't here, but I have used it. In fact, I have one of those chips on my wife's primary streaming machine at the moment. It is a nice performance upgrade over the 1700, which we'll also cover in a future video. Put that on maybe an X470 board or X570 if you want to get something a bit more premium. Use the included cooler, 8 cores, 16 threads. It'll give you a lot of performance for the future. The next CPU that I would buy would be the Ryzen 9 3900X. It is $500 and it's a lot of money, but as I mentioned, if you watched it during the benchmarks, I talked about the future-proofing of it, the 5+ years of performance, the ability to play any game today and any game for the next 3 to 5 years and live stream them or watch videos or multitask, the content creation performance. If you want a premium machine, I do think the Ryzen 9 is worth it. If you do buy the Ryzen 9, replace the cooler. It's nice, but no, that's too much heat and too much going on if you're really doing a lot with your machine, and we'll talk about coolers in a minute. Finally, the last CPU that I would buy, yes, I would still buy the i9 9900K. It is amazing. Fastest gaming CPU in the world, bar none. It is a superior experience in all respects except price over Ryzen, with maybe the exception of content creation and multitasking. The Ryzen 9 3900X beats it. But in terms of pure gaming performance, it really has no equal. It's not a huge difference. It's not as much as it used to be. Compared to the Ryzen 7 2700X, which this demolished, in my opinion, although for more money, it's less of a gain over, say, a 3700X. However, there are 3 things about the i9 that it has going for it over the Ryzen processors. Number 1, software encoding and development. Programs are just written and designed for Intel chips. They've been designed for Intel for years, and while Ryzen is amazing, absolutely incredible, amazing, 2 thumbs up to AMD for the amazing performance and the huge leap that they had with the Ryzen processors, the fact of the matter is 100% of programs today run awesome on Intel. Most programs run great on AMD, but there are still holdouts. There are still things that aren't meant for it. You saw it in the Far Cry benchmark. If you do any content creation of programs like Adobe, for example, that still runs better on Intel, full stop, versus AMD. It's changing, and it will change over time. But if you're buying today and you want the best today in every possible program you run, Intel's amazing. It's just expensive. But if you're okay with the price, this really is the best. Another benefit is the integrated graphics. This has an iGPU, which you're never going to use to play any games with. I hope not in any case, but it does have Intel QuickSync. And if you want to live stream, for example, you can use the QuickSync encoding on this CPU and not have to use your graphics card or the CPU to do encoding. And as nice as that Ryzen 9 3900X is, considering it does not have integrated graphics or an integrated transcoder or video encoder for live streaming or playback, and this does, that takes some of the thunder out of that chip. And the fact that the single core performance is faster here, not hugely, but it is, does kind of tend to neutralize it a bit. So if you want a proven platform, you want integrated graphics for transcoding, it is still worth considering, even with Zen 2. And then finally, the third reason to buy Intel. If you already have an Intel system with a 300 series motherboard, maybe you have an i5 8400 or an i3 8100. Those are the previous generation 2017 chips. But if you have such a system, even if it has just a B360 motherboard, you can upgrade to the i9 9900K without changing your motherboard. No Windows reinstall will be required. No Windows licensing issues. You don't have to reinstall your software. You will probably need a better cooler than whatever your lower end CPU came with. But if you're spending $500, a cooler shouldn't break the bank. It's a 20-minute change. Take off your old cooler, take off your old CPU, drop this in place, put a better cooler on, turn your computer on, and that's it. You have amazing performance and you're ready to go. If you want to upgrade an i5 8400 to, say, a Ryzen 7 3700X, you need a new motherboard, you need a new CPU, you can use the included cooler, you will need to reinstall Windows. Trying to switch from Intel to AMD on the motherboard side without reinstalling Windows is just asking for a headache and a half. Don't. So you're committing to a Windows reinstall. That's a big pain in the neck. While this is more money, what's your time and effort and struggles worth? That's where I really think this also makes sense, is for people upgrading. I promised I'd talk about coolers. We're going to talk about coolers. For a Ryzen 5 or a Ryzen 7 CPU, in general, use the included stock cooler. Maybe on the Ryzen 7, if you just prefer something that looks different or maybe is a little bit quieter, you could replace it. But for most people, use the stock cooler on Ryzen 5 or Ryzen 7. Ryzen 9, I strongly recommend you replace the cooler. It does the job, but it doesn't boost quite as high. It does get hot and it does get loud with 12 cores running. So follow the Intel advice for cooling, in my opinion, if you're spending $500 on a 3900X. As far as Intel, it doesn't come with a cooler, so that's not even a choice. As complicated as coolers seem, it really isn't that complicated. Let me make this really simple for you. There are 3 classes of coolers that you should consider for an i9 9900K. $50 tower coolers for stock or mild overclocking, $90 tower coolers for 5 to 5.1 gigahertz fixed, or 280 to 360 millimeter liquid coolers for basically the same thing, 5 to 5.1 gigahertz fixed clock speed. Now, these 3 coolers I have in front of me are all in the $50-ish price range. Some of these are closer to 60, but the point is these kind of coolers are going to provide great performance. Not as good as the big ones, such as that Noctua there, but they're going to provide great performance, and they are not as large. If you are size constrained in your case, if you don't want a big, huge, heavy cooler hanging off your motherboard, if you don't want to block RAM, notice that I have the fan quite high up here. That's because I've got beautiful DDR4 RAM, which you can't really see very well because the fan is blocking it. If you go with this smaller Noctua, for example, it doesn't block the RAM as much, and so you both can see your beautiful RAM, and it's just easier overall to install and fit into your case. So these type of coolers in the $50 to $60 price range are the first step. Having said that, if you've got $500 to spend on a CPU, do not pass go, do not collect $200, buy one of these 2 coolers, full stop. The DarkRock Pro 4 is a little bit quieter than the Noctua NHD15, but not by much. Once they're in a case under your desk, you're probably not going to notice, and it's all black. It is a little bit smaller in terms of installation size than the Noctua, which is kind of nice and convenient, but maybe doesn't cool quite as well as the Noctua. And of course, most of you, if you're watching my channel, probably have at least heard of Noctua at this point. The NHD15 is pretty much the king of $90 large tower coolers. It's huge, as you can see right here, but it does the job wonderfully, and it was used in these benchmarks. And as you saw from the temperatures, and of course, if you didn't really pay attention, rewind the video and go back and watch the 3 videos I showed you on the i9. It's running at 5 gigahertz. Take a look at Assassin's Creed Odyssey, especially because it's using all 8 cores. Look how cool that chip is running. It really is nice. Finally, that brings us to the 280 or 360 millimeter liquid coolers. Do not buy a 240 millimeter liquid cooler for a processor like that. I've tried it. It is not sufficient. It runs hot. The additional 36% surface area of the 280s does make a legitimate difference. I have a 240 millimeter cooler on my i7 8700K, and it squeals and complains to run at 5 gigahertz. It's not a pleasant experience. 4.7 is still pretty hot with it. A 280 would be much more appropriate, and for the i9 with 8 cores, definitely. Now, these do not necessarily run substantially cooler in terms of temperature than the Noctua NHD15 right here. Maybe a degree or 2. The primary reason to go with these are because you don't want a huge heavy tower cooler hanging off of your CPU. If you move your computer a lot, if you go to LAN parties, if you carry it around your house for whatever reason, if you travel to your beach house and use it, or a friend's house or whatever. The benefit to these is there's not a lot of weight on your motherboard, and you can pick up your computer and move it around much more safely than if you have that huge beast sitting on it. Also, some people prefer liquid cooling just for appearance because it frees up all the room around the CPU. You can see your beautiful RAM, the radiator's mounted out of the way. As far as which one you buy, these are all 280s right here. It doesn't make any difference. They all effectively cool about the same. Most 280s or 360s will cool within a degree or two of each other. The differences are style, appearance, brand, RGB or no RGB, and how loud they are, because different ones have different. This isn't a cooler review, so we're not going to get into it, but I will tell you the noise profile of the fans that come with these vary wildly. Thank you all so much for watching this video, watching all the way to the end. Gold star for all of you. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you love it. Remember to subscribe to my channel with that big huge red button directly below. Hit the bell notification icon to actually be told when new videos come out, because otherwise YouTube doesn't send out notifications. Links in the video description below to everything that I've talked about here. Those are affiliate links. They do support the channel. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I bought all of the CPUs used in the test today. None of these are press sampled. I have been press sampled on some of them, but all of the benchmarks done today were with retail processors, not press samples. And I certainly appreciate your support using those links, whatever you choose to buy. Comments. Leave your comments down in the video description below. Let me know what you thought of this video. Let me know what CPU you're interested in buying. Let me know what tests and benchmarks you're interested in seeing. And of course, suggestions and topics for future videos are always welcome as well. Follow me on Twitch, Twitter, and Discord. Links in the video description below to those down at the very, very bottom. Appreciate you watching. Thank you all so much for being here, and I will see you next time.